Hello, I'm Michael Pierce, and this is The Human Condition. Today our topic is, can I improve my genetic expression? Well, what does it mean, genetic expression? Genetic expression means the ability to turn your genes up or down, which can be good or bad. Sometimes we have genes that are good for us, and sometimes we have genes that are bad for us, both in the same body, in the same cell. We inherit genes that are leftover genes from the dinosaur days, genes that are oncogenes or cancer genes, many kinds of genes that we don't even understand, and they're called introns and exons. These different genes make up the whole plan of what the human organism can be based on proteins. So a gene simply is a code or an instruction on how to make a protein, or a combination of genes will combine to make different proteins. So if you wanted to turn up bad genes, you would get something like cancer. And if you wanted to turn up good genes, you would get something like radiant health and plaque-free hearts and Alzheimer's-free brains and that kind of thing. We want to talk about the fact that while we do inherit genes, and genetic tendencies can lead to different diseases or lacks of diseases in different people and animals and cell lines and even species and herds of animals, that people, when they look at their genes, should not feel like a bad gene inherited is a death knell. Because most of the time when we inherit bad genes, we don't inherit a gene that is deterministic, that says you will die of this disease. We inherit a group of genes, or one gene, that has odds. It basically has a tendency. It's like taking odds for a horse race. It says your likelihood for having this problem is higher than somebody else, but it's not really clear exactly how much risk there is for most of these genes. So a person that discovers that they have a gene for a disease that's frankly a clear disease gene, like the breast cancer gene, or a person that has a SNP, which is a fraction of a gene, like a letter in a word instead of the actual word, they really don't have a death knell sentence, a sentence that says you shall be sick, you shall be ill, because they have something that is around called epigenetics. And epigenetics is the things outside of the genes. And it turns out that in science, epigenetics is far more important than genetics for most illnesses. Now, there's a couple of things that a person or an animal or a cell line might inherit that would be that death knell that I talked about. They would be a really clear thing. But that is not most of the time. Most people in most cases and most problems, even if there's a genetic familial component, there is something you can do about it, and that means change your epigenetics. The mechanism is called cellular immediate early gene response, or CIEGR, and it makes use of a set of proto-oncogenes and pre-genes called CFOS, CMER, and CJUN, which are kind of technical terms that talk about the signalers inside cells that fire within nanoseconds of a stressor or something good like eustress, or something bad like distress. So when you find out that you won the lottery or that you're going to have a nice big meal, in nanoseconds your genes start to change their expression for the better or for the worse. That can happen from stress that's perceived, that's maybe not even real. It can be all in your mind. It can be stresses that are real, like exercising a long time or being exposed to the cold for a long time or the elements. It can be from being exposed to toxins and chemicals. It can be from being exposed to deficiencies of nutrients. And it can also be being exposed to excess nutrients in a good way that are more than you thought you needed, that might help you. Certainly not a toxic level, but more than is the minimum. So it can go either way. The idea is that genes respond to epigenetics based on whether you're putting good stuff in or bad stuff in. So genes can go down in function and genes can go up in function, and they can provide better or worse outcomes. So really, when someone knows that they've inherited a gene or a set of genes or a tendency, they've only inherited a tendency. It's like getting a hand in poker. You're not destined to have that hand at the end of the game because you have a chance to trade for new cards. And so that chance of outcome is variable, and you can control it. The downside of this is that if you inherit a bunch of those SNPs or genes, you might have to be more careful than other people, and that's not fair, and that's life. So want to know what your tendencies are, and you want to know if you're one of those people that has to be more careful with this or that biochemical pathway. And so how you do that is through SNP testing and biochemical testing and elimination diets and lab testing and all kinds of stuff that we get to in other videos. But the concept is, some of you may have to be stricter than others, and that's not fair. But it's really neat, because if you do take care of yourself, you might live a good, long, healthy life without any symptoms, and you might be able to reverse chronic disease that you've already had manifest. Because genes can be turned up and down like a volume control knob on a stereo. They're not on or off, they're not bad or good, they're just at a certain level. The factors that we can control are the macros, the percentage of protein, fat, and carbs, the good food versus bad food with chemicals in it. If we've got processed food, it's going to be a bad thing. If we've got GMOs, if we've got processed food additives, if we've got a lot of empty carbs without very good nutrients like minerals and B vitamins and fat-soluble vitamins. If we've got lectins, which can be a very bad antigen or a stimulator of the immune system that can make our immune system overwork itself and eventually form autoimmune diseases. So we really want to be able to try to identify all the man-made toxins and all the natural toxins that exist and which ones we're exposed to. So over time, I would like to predict and see that we're going to see more environmental toxic laboratories. We're going to see more and more laboratories that you can access, that you'll be able to test your dioxin, you'll be able to test your PCB, you'll be able to test your exposure to phthalates and all these different chemicals. And it's going to make industry pretty mad, but it's going to happen very, very soon. There are already a lot of human-made toxins that we can test for, like pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, things like solvents. Those things we can already test for to some degree, but there's going to be more of that in the marketplace. It's going to revolutionize tort law, which is who sues who over what. The factors that we can control are oxidative stress. So oxidative stress is things like working too hard without enough oxygen, like doing anaerobic training. It would be like breathing car exhaust, breathing fumes of some kind of exhaust or some kind of chemical. Oxidative stress is not having enough selenium or enough minerals in some cases. The downside of oxygen is good for us, but oxygen is also bad for us if it mixes with other types of chemicals. And you can measure this with a lab test that's measured in urine called 8-hydroxydeoxyguanosine. And it's one of many tests that are out there for measuring the oxidative stress. The reason I brought it up is because it's really easy to get a hold of. It's in organic acid tests in urine, and it's offered by the Dutch laboratory and some other laboratories, which I like. It's part of a adrenal and sex hormone panel that can be done in your urine. Very easily and simply, you just have to stop eating a couple of fruits before you take the test, about 48 hours, and then you can get very accurate measurements. Mitochondria and fatigue are a big factor. Another sign that will tell you that your genes are under stress is just having a lot of fatigue. Being able to either have excess sleep or not enough sleep, those can often be signs of mitochondrial stress and oxidative stress, where the mitochondria or the energy producers inside your body don't produce energy efficiently. They don't produce ATP, which is the molecule that we use to form energy in our bodies. It's the wood that we burn in the fuel or the coal or the oil that we burn in the chamber of our fires of our body that give us energy, that ATP molecule. We rip off a phosphate component of that molecule, and that's what it looks like to burn fuel inside the cell. Sleep hygiene and discipline. If we have good sleep hygiene and good discipline around our sleep habits, we can really help to control our genetic expression. We can even control cancer outcomes. It turns out that 90 to 95% of human cancers and animal cancers are diet and environment related. They are completely avoidable. Nobody wants to talk about this, but it's in the literature and it has been for decades. Dr. William Walsh has discovered in the last 5 to 8 years that bipolar and brainwaves, the bipolar disorder that used to be called manic depressive disorder, has different types of problems that are formed by the oxidative damage. That this is a reversible genetic stress that happens to our genes, and that it's really kind of universal across different people, and that it is across different races and genders and sexual orientations and really every different kind of body type and chemistry type and gene is equally exposed to oxidative stress. So you might find that bipolar is distributed pretty evenly across different populations based on oxidative stress and their antioxidants in their diet. Believe it or not, a high plant-based diet with seed oils is a very bad oxidative stress diet because there's a lot of oxidative stress on those omega-6 molecules. If a person eats a very healthy, clean, animal-based fat diet, they're going to have a lot less oxidative spots that can oxidize in the fat chain of the molecule, because the fat molecule doesn't have spaces where there's a gap where oxidative stress can happen because it's saturated fat. The fat is saturated and there's no open spaces. An unsaturated fat has open spaces where oxidative damage can happen. So believe it or not, eating a plant-based diet might be more of an oxidative stress than eating a clean animal-based fat diet. Toxins like metals, pesticides, mold, food additives, GMOs, these are known. Deficits of minerals, the trace minerals, and there's like 70 trace minerals that we need that aren't radioactive. The saturated fats, as I said, clean saturated fats. Taking in good amounts of nutrients is something that a lot of people do. They say, but I eat this food, I eat that food, and there's this much zinc in there, and there's this much vitamin A in there, and I'm eating all these foods that are nutrient dense, and they're often plant-based foods. And I'll say, yes, but if you take a bunch of lectins in with those foods, which are in the natural plant foods, you're going to bind to a lot of those minerals and vitamins and poop them right out, and you're not going to keep them. You're going to rent your nutrients, and that's a real problem. That is a problem for genetic expression because you think you're eating the nutrients, but you're just renting them, and that will not feed your DNA. Poor bile from lectins or high-carb diets can alter digestion. So lectins don't only bind to nutrients and carry them out of your body, but they also can interfere with your organs and give you things like arthritis. And when they lock onto your digestive system, they can cause problems with your secretions, problems with your gut motility, and problems with your ability to produce good quality bile. And so that might give a person that would have an inability to digest fats and feel like they just can't produce enough bile to break down their fats and proteins. Stress management. Simple stress management like meditation, good recreation, enough idle time to do nothing, chiropractic, acupuncture, walking, baths, massage, counseling, hot packs, group therapy, all of these things, time together with your family and your loved ones, having nice meals, especially if we repeatedly have ourselves under stress every single day. One of the near last ones is reduce the number and dose of medication lifestyle and jabs. If your lifestyle is medication-based and jab-based, you're not really taking control of your health. And you certainly can decide to do those things for good reasons, but don't kid yourself into thinking that a deficiency of medication or deficiency of shots is where good health comes from, because it really doesn't. Getting at the root cause of disease is not usually just based on random illness. A lot of people think that illness is just random and it just shows up in their lives, and I would say to them that no, the combination of their genes from their mother and father's genes combining to form their first cells was the random event. But that random event is modifiable once it goes into you and you start living. So once you start living, and what your mother ate and what she fed you and what you eat, what you feed yourself is very important, both what you feed your mind and what you feed your body. That is how you can improve your genetic expression.